So the center was established about 6 years ago through an endowment by Dr. Khayrallah, who's a Lebanese American philanthropist. And he and I have collaborated previously on projects focused on North Carolina, in which about actually more than that, about 10 years ago, we went about doing what Ruth Ann does, what the Arab American National Museum does, and what a lot of people do, which is to collect the history, the stuff, the oral histories, the material history of those who immigrated either recently or who are descendants from those who immigrated 3-4 generations ago. And the idea is to preserve that history and to share it. And that's the mission of the Khayrallah Center. It is to preserve the history of the Lebanese in the United States and beyond, really, and to share it as widely as possible. And I'll go over what that means. So Moise and I joined forces and established a center at North Carolina State University. And here you see an aerial shot of that. In the last 4 years alone, you can see very quickly that we have been very busy. We have preserved over 500,000 historical records. We have preserved about 270,000 Arab newspapers. I'll talk a little bit more on that. But this is a snapshot, if you will, of the kind of work that we have been doing. And I'll go through it a little bit. So as I said, our job is to preserve the history. What that basically means is we collect anything from letters to books, newspapers, census data, photographs, sound and visual recordings. And the idea is, whether it is an individual or whether it is a family or whether it is an organization, we all have material that speak to the history of our people here. And just for a second, I would like to emphasize how critical it is for us to preserve this history. Because the fact of the matter is, if just in the United States alone, if you look at the history textbooks, there is no mention of either Lebanese Americans or Arab Americans. We are completely not seen as part of this country, even though we have been here over 150 years. So this is not simply a matter of, we just need to do it because it's fun. It's actually essential. It's an existential issue. It's important to preserve these things because we can use them to tell our story. And if we do not tell our story, somebody else will tell our story. And generally speaking, when people from the outside are going to tell the story, it's going to be fairly negative. Or at best, but I would argue that a lot of times they simply ignore our presence here. So this is a vital aspect of things. So the first part of that is we collect this information, and the second part is we share this information. And so we take, like what you see here, a business directory, we digitize it so it's completely searchable, and we tell stories based on this business directories. And the way we tell these stories is either through exhibits. We have a traveling exhibit called The Lebanese in America, and we are getting very close to finishing a new exhibit to celebrate the centenary of Al-Rabita Al-Qalamiyya, and that will be out hopefully in mid-September. Originally, it was going to be a physical exhibition touring the United States, but because of the pandemic, we have opted to shift to a virtual exhibit that tells the story of 100 years of Lebanese and Arab cultural contributions. We do documentaries. Our first documentary was called Cedars and the Pines, the history of the Lebanese in North Carolina. And our most recent documentary, which was released in February, and we have been doing a lot of virtual screenings on this, is about a very tragic and violent act of racial violence against Lebanese immigrants in 1929 Florida. And all of these things are available on the websites. We do digital projects. We also do training workshops for teachers, both American teachers and Lebanese teachers. We bring Lebanese teachers over here to, train them for 2-3 weeks on the history of Lebanon, but also more importantly on the history of the Lebanese diaspora. So when they go back into their classrooms, they can integrate the story of the diaspora into that. And here, again, I would like to take a moment to indicate it's really important for us to preserve this history because honestly, you cannot understand Lebanon without understanding its diaspora. It is impossible. And I'm not simply talking about the fact that the Lebanese diaspora 100 years ago or today is vital for the financial survival of Lebanon, but I'm talking about the circulation of ideas and peoples and objects and materials is what shapes Lebanon as much as Lebanon shapes the Lebanese immigrants themselves. So these training workshops are very important for us. We work on collaborative projects. We just finished digitizing and in fact completed it about a month ago, the Amir Rehani collection, and we did that with the Amir Rehani Foundation and the Amir Rehani Museum in Freike. We are now working with the Southern Federation of Lebanese and Syrian American clubs, Syrian and Lebanese American clubs, to digitize their archive. We have a very fantastic partnership with the Arab American National Museum. And in fact, the exhibition that we are releasing in September is partly due to this amazing collaboration that we have with them, but we also do a lot of other projects with them.